brother. So let's get into it. Let's talk about your writing career and why you do what. So, everybody knows you. You've been bombing for a very long time. What got you interested in writing as a young person?
One of my friends, he was a break dancer and he started writing, so I was really good friends with him. And he pretty much peer pressured me into taking a tag and writing along with him. But before even that started, I mean, I noticed graffiti in the area, mainly on the highways on the way to church. Because originally, before I moved to Queens, my parents lived in Brooklyn, and they were religious, and they used to keep close ties to the church in Brooklyn. It was located on like Cortell U Road. So every Sunday we would take the LIE to the BQE and whatever other highways and streets to get to this church. So every Sunday it was like, you know, I got to see like all the graph all the way there and back. So I got to see highway graffiti in Queens, and then some of it in Brooklyn. And then after church, we'd either go to someone else's house to continue services or have a meal at someone else's house, or we would go to Chinatown to get Asian groceries down there. So I would either go across the Williamsburg Bridge or the Manhattan Bridge, and I would see graph in the Lower East Side or whatever the train would ride side by side on the side of the highway. I mean, the side of the bridge, I would see the graph on those trains as well. So, I mean, sometimes I would see some really nice stuff, and it kind of got me hyped into it. One of the big things that probably was most intriguing to me was seeing the documentary Star Wars when it came on PBS, seeing the pieces on there and the graph and the breakdance, and that was probably the most interesting. And then shortly thereafter, the books Subway Art came out, and I racked it from B. Dalton, started tracing all the pieces in the book and stuff like that. Those were probably some of the main things that got me into graph.
And so in those early days when you were traveling around with your parents and you were seeing it on the streets, or is there anything in particular that stood out to you? Any names or anybody that impressed you that you might have thought you wanted to emulate?
Yeah, there was quite a few. I mean, most of the stuff I saw on the highway, the names were written really, really big. I mean, I remember seeing Quick RTW, and he was going to war with the other Quick from KD on the LIE, and then I would see names like Ghost and TZ and Wreck out there, Visa and Ross, EA. A lot of the Risk guys, QV, NOG guys were on the freeway. And then getting into the Brooklyn side of things, I would see like Adam, was a Joust, Trike, a lot of OE stuff. That guy Axe was up on the freeway a lot, so I would see those guys up. And where I grew up was Bayside. It was in between Flushing and like Hillside in Jamaica. So I would see like a lot of the Flushing writers, and then on the other side of town, I would see a lot of the TPA guys, like the Cap and the Sir, and Say and all those guys in that area, So
when did you
got to see a lot of stuff.
When did you go from seeing that stuff to actually doing it? How was that for you? How'd you get the nerve up to go, and did someone, take you out the first time around?
I probably saw it maybe before I got actually interested in maybe about a year or two out before that, but I didn't start actually going out painting till like the end of like the fall of like 1984. I was writing Cirque, like like that picture got posted up there. I was writing Cirque. That was pretty much the first tag I stuck with for the first 2 years. My boy was writing Cess, not Cess, Tough City, but Seth's from my neighborhood, and he dragged me out. You know, he showed me how to rack cans with the little um, you know, pinning of the sleeve and going in there, draping it over his shoulders and racking the cans in the local hardware stores. And then, you know, he'd be like, hey, sneak out of your house, tell your parents you're going to the library. We'd paint like some handball courts, or down on the local highway, which was the Clearview Expressway. We would jump down there and start cracking some outlines and stuff like that. Um, that was like my first few times out painting.
And prior to that, were you into drawing at all, or did you have any sort of artistic inclinations?
Yeah, I did a little bit of drawing prior to, you know, graph and everything, but it wasn't graffiti at all. It was actually um, through my mom. My mom was an artist herself, and she was actually an art teacher, and she was trying to train me, um, you know, early stages with sketching and proportions and stuff like that. She was an oil painter and a sculptor, so she was like, oh, you know, I want you to draw like hands and eyeballs, and I want you to draw the human figure. And she would have like little like statues like this, and she would tell me, hey, you know, I want you to position it a certain way, and I want you to draw um, whatever. And then she would have me imitating, you know, like still life, like bowls of fruit and shadowing and 3D and stuff like that. I wasn't really into it at all. I was like, this is boring to me. I didn't really care for it. I was more into like being outside and doing what normal kids at that age were doing, like, you know, riding our bikes and BMXing and whatever, you know. So I didn't take any interest into it. So that was like a smack in her face when I got into graffiti instead. She was really pissed about that. So that was about it.
And so you start sneaking out of your house, you start doing all this stuff. She's pissed. Your parents probably don't like it at all. When did you go from being Cirque to being Duel?
Uh, so I started writing Cirque in '84 after probably like a dozen other names prior to it. But in 1986 is when I switched names to Duel. The first 2 years were more or less like trial and error periods for me, because I didn't really have an actual mentor in the game. Like, you know, at that particular time, like it was just me and that kid, Sess, and a couple of local kids from the area. You know, we were all in the same pretty much boat, you know, just kind of like figuring it out for ourselves at the time, and maybe cutting out of school every now and again, and riding the bus to Main Street and catching the train, and doing a little bit of benching, a little bit of motions. But when I first started out, I really didn't know any of the rules to the game. I was doing a lot of biting. I was going over other people, you know, taking spots without knowing any better, you know. And you know, at the age of 12, you know, I had no idea what I was doing. And you know, some of the kids that I went over, they were a lot older than me, so they knew where I lived or found out where I lived. They rang my doorbell, was like, "Hey, dude, you know, you went over me here," and you know, it was kind of an embarrassing situation. So, you know, when I could, I was searching for a new name, and I was just basically looking at other names that were really fresh, and you know, the letters that I liked. You know, basically how I selected a name was like writing out the alphabet, circling out the letters that I liked the most, and try to spell something out of that the letters I selected. And then when I found the name that I liked the most, which was Duel, then I went with that. You know.
When did you finally start to meet other writers that you might have been able to paint with, or crews? You know, how old are you, and then how did that come about?
Uh, I'd probably say maybe about 15. I started venturing a little bit outside the neighborhood, or um, maybe I would come across other writers that were a little bit more known, and then just kind of paired up with them. I would say the first real writer I came across was Crow. Um, risks. I actually ran into him with my boy Rock. We were actually coming back from Pergamit. We went to Lake Success to get some cans. They were on sale at Pergamit. So as we were riding the bus back, um, I guess Crow seen that we had the bags, and you could see through the little plastic bags, and he was like, "Hey, what you guys write?" And then we started talking to him, and then we exchanged numbers, and then I became cool with him. He was like the first real writer there. And then a couple of the TMR guys, like Saint and them from the neighborhood, I became cool with those guys, and that was probably one of the first well-known crews that I got down with. And I was about 14 or 15.
And for those of you that don't know, this is one of the writers he's talking about, Saint there, well-known writer from Queens, who used to bomb a lot, trains and streets and highways and everything. And there's young Duel on a handball court. So, you were known for these sort of straight letters and for doing highways. What was driving you at the time? You were getting up, hitting highways, you started to become sort of moving around. Where'd you learn about style, or, where were you getting your cues from?
Probably just like looking at other people's stuff, and being like, "Ooh, that came out pretty fresh. I'm gonna do something relatively similar." Or I would just, when I would draw my own stuff, I would, try to manipulate the letters as best as I can, and then be like, "All right, this looks pretty cool. Let me try doing something else," and just try, different fonts and different lettering. But I wanted to make sure that when I did it, it was something that I could manage to do, because I wasn't really into piecing like that. I thought it was easy to do straight letters because they were legible and easy to read on the freeway. I was imagining at that time, like if you're traveling at 50, 60 miles per hour, and there's a lot of other graffiti on the wall, I wanted it to be something that would stand out and was easy to read.
Got it. So
That picture you got right
your
there is my
audience was in a
first
car.
piece. Huh?
Your audience was in a car.
Yeah, pretty much.
So this is your first piece.
That's right.
And where was this located?
That was on the Long Island Railroad tracks. I was going to school in Flushing at the time, at this private school, and one of the kids I met up with over there, he used to write so's. We went and brought some cans to school, and during a lunch break, we went down there and knocked that piece out. It was like some cheap silver that was like impossible to outline, and that's why I got that fat force field black outline around the piece.
It's not a bad first attempt.
It's all right, not bad, I guess.
And so, you were mentioning, doing it for sort of the audience on the highways, and for, here is a highway spot.
Yeah, I think that's the Grand Central right there. I'm not too far from Forest Hills, I believe.
And one of your early throw-ups, I think.
Yeah, that was probably when I started using that particular D at that time. One of the early ones. I think that might be a late 87 or early 88 throw up, when the letters were a little bit more crunched in together and the lines were overlapping into each other, like into, starting off in the letter previous. And I cleaned it up by erasing those lines inside the throw up. But yeah, I mainly did mostly highways at that time because because of all the traveling my parents did, going from borough to borough or wherever. I was familiar with these highways already, and that's why I mainly did highways at that time. Trains were a little harder for me to get to because I would have to take a bus to the train, and sometimes the buses stop running at certain hours, and then you don't want to have to try to trek back. I didn't have a car back then, so it was easier for me to do highways than it was for me to do transit.
So when I look at this piece, I see all these different crews in your letters, FPV, DST, KKB, IG, MFS. You know, this sounds like you were connecting with all kinds of people throughout
Um,
Queens.
yeah, that was the second piece I did. It was a Whitestone, and I don't know. I think back then when I was younger, when you were putting up crews, it was kind of like representing like I mean basically like ribbons on your uniform. You're putting up all these different crews in your thing to show that you're affiliated with certain writers or certain neighborhoods and stuff like that.
Sure. And yeah, these are all different kind. I'm guessing these are all Queens crews. Is that correct?
Uh, I all of them but KKB. I guess Image, that was Image's crew. I guess he was from Manhattan. So wherever exactly where he was from, that was the only out of Queens crew that's in that stack.
Got it. So you continue to paint highways, and I remember the highways that you're doing very clearly. You kind of came, fell into this tradition of just bombing borough to borough and getting your name out there, as you mentioned. And I think by the time that we met, you and you started painting with us, uh, things maybe changed a little bit. What happened when you met up with writers like Ghost? What changed for you?
Um, that would that he I guess he fine tuned my game. You know what I'm saying? Like, I thought I was like doing work until like I seen how like you and him and JA were doing stuff like consecutive back to back to back to back, conserving paint and doing dusty throw ups as opposed to solid throw ups, going a lot larger and doing things real thorough, like leaving no space for anyone to tuck their names in between, um, and just thoroughly killing something, not just coming to a clean train and doing like one or two throw ups on a few cars and then going home, or bombing in a borough and just doing like two or three throw ups scatter in a 5 block radius and then going home. It was like, let's destroy the shit out of this train, end to end, and really you know piss some people off when we do it. So, they're like exactly like that. I mean, I probably wouldn't have done it like that before meeting you guys. I mean, I've done a couple of things, for impactful reasons, but like not as intense until I met you guys, for sure.
In doing that, was it what was happening in your life that you could do that? Were you working? What did your family think? Like, how did sort of ramping up and change things for you personally?
Um, let's see. I mean, I think at that particular time, I was already out of high school. I was probably in community college, just you know, not taking school serious. Um, I was working full time at the time, but I was like fully, engaged with the whole graph community and the graph life. I just felt like that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to be up and known. So I dedicated a lot of time to that.
Did all this bombing, you know, bring you, any problems because you were spending a lot of time painting. How did it impact your personal life? Did you have a personal life?
Yeah, I mean, it did impact me quite a bit. I mean, my parents were completely upset with the whole situation. Um, you know, my involvement with um, TMR had invited a lot of beef from um, neighboring crews, and they brought that trash to my house, and you really couldn't go anywhere, you know, um, clubs or just anywhere without having to look over your shoulders. So it impacted me quite a bit, and then having to go over people and people going back over me, and stuff like that. You know, you have to go back and repair your stuff or get up farther away. So these guys have to really go out of their way to find your stuff and go over it. So, you know, it helped me and it kind of hurt me at the same time. You know, I mean, it was just a lot of stress. But, you know, I mean, it did push me to go further away from Queens and out of the area. So they would have to work for it if they wanted to go over me. But yeah, I mean, I was dating girls at the time, and you know, I mean, you know, they would be like, "Damn, dude, you know, you bring a lot of freaking baggage with you when you're with your graffiti addiction and all the stuff that you are involved in." So yeah, it affected me and everybody pretty much that was close to me. Even like friends that I had that didn't write, they had to bear the brunt of some of the stuff. And they'd be like, "Yo, isn't that your man, Duel, man? Yo, you tell that sucker I'm gonna kick his ass when I see him," and you know, whatever it was, and they'd have to, you know, you know, deal with that stuff too. You know, so it was annoying. You know how it was in the 80s and 90s. It was a New York was a very violent place. It was like, you know, I mean, you know, so it's
It
crazy.
it it was crazy. And you know, and you're bombing not only with throw-ups, you know, you mentioned straight letters, and just to give the audience an example, you know, this is what would be on the highways. You had, you know, Brooklyn, Queens, you had a lot of spots, and it seemed like you really were concerned with changing the way your name looked just about every single time if it wasn't a throw-up.
I do like, you know, toying around with letters for the most part. I mean, it is important to kind of have like a style that's recognizable, like a brand. You know, like if they see your throw up, they know automatically, hey, that's Duel from Riss, or like, you know, see a GH or a JA or your throw up. You know, it's like even if they're traveling at a high speed or you didn't outline your throw up, you know, they just see the shape of the fill-in. They already know who that is. But at the same time, it's nice to be able to flex a little bit by doing different styles. So this way, you know, people don't think you're like a one-trick pony and you're a little versatile. You can actually do other people's names or, you know, show a little bit of flair when you're doing your name, you know?
Yeah, and you see it, and you see it in here. You also seem to have a bit of a sense of humor and saying things or writing phrases um, next to your pieces or next to your throw ups. I remember you always seemed to like wanting to add something there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of the times I remember, you know, when we would do stations or trains and stuff like that, I would write messages that were just there to basically irk the police. You know, I mean, I would write like little rhymes and limericks and stuff like that. Or I would use phrases from like rap songs and just rearrange the words around just a tad bit, so it'd be directed towards them. Um, and just yeah, just dropping I guess little bits and pieces of humor or just being a smart ass in some shape or form. That was my thing, I guess, at that time. I don't do that now, but you know, I mean,
So basically, you were a bit of a troublemaker.
yeah, that was probably a good way of putting it.
So you hook up with the risk crew, you start bombing more intensely, you start hitting trains. Here's an example of one of your throw ups on the train. Do you remember any of this stuff, or is this stuff sort of like long forgotten for you since it's so long ago? This is 1992.
I remember that day. I mean, that was the day me and you were in there, and then Sento was in there as well. Um, and we did some pieces in there, and then some throw ups, and then the sun coming up, this guy disappears, and then we get spooked and we try to leave. And I just remember Sento making a lot of noise, throwing chairs over fences and shit like that. But I mean, you know, you know, I do remember most of them. I mean, it's not like I did a whole lot of clean trains, so I mean, I could probably remember every trip that I did. You know?
So here's one more just to show the audience. You know, you were piecing on trains as well as on the streets, and here's I guess a pretty good night.
Yeah, I think that was me, you, and Sento again. I think that was the night that me and you were trying to get up to this one layup, and it was elevated. I think we were climbing up the side of some wall, and it was like real icy out, and it was like literally like 2 inch ledges. We were like clawing our way up there, and as we were going up halfway the wall, I think one of us spotted police as they drove by underneath us and didn't even notice us, and we got up there, and then we knocked out those pieces. I think
Yeah,
that's what was going on that
yeah,
day,
yeah. I
right?
think yeah. This was on the A elevateds, and when we went to paint this, um, we didn't go off the station. We climbed up the elevated poles and off of some other train tracks, and it was very difficult to climb. It was the craziest climb ever. It was something that I won't ever recommend to anybody to do because it was so nuts. And it was because Sento wanted to go this way and was very particular about getting in where no one's spotting us. And it was climbing above a police station, a police precinct. So as we were climbing up, not only were there police cars going by, but there was actually a precinct underneath us. And but we got away with it.
Yeah,
This is 1994. We got away with it, and life went on.
yeah,
And
man.
you ended up getting daytime shots, which I'm kind of shocked because I never saw the daytime shots.
I don't even remember if I did take those pictures. I don't know where they came from.
So, you had many people you painted with. You painted with, we painted together. You mentioned Cento and Ghost and Saint and Crow. You also painted with Det.
Yeah, he was like one of my earlier partners. I mean, we did a lot of pieces together. We were, even though I had painted quite some time at this point, I wasn't very skilled at piecing. So, um, and quite honestly, I mean, before got down with the Risk Crew or met you guys, I think I probably did like a total of like 10 pieces from like 84 to like 92. Not counting straight letters, of course. But that's about how many pieces I did. I think after I met you guys, I probably did about 200 before I left for the military in 95. Um, and a lot of those pieces came with debt. We were, because there was no internet back then. We couldn't be like, oh snap, let's go online and, you know, check out Flickr and see who got the ill piece and beg, borrow, and steal pieces. It was like, we're trading negatives with other writers and, whatever stuff floated around. We, and people we came across, we would try to, um, mimic what they were doing. I mean, one of the big influences was Web Chaos, man. He was one of the nastiest dudes ever, So, we kind of gravitated to his flow. I always kind of like admired like RTW and their stuff, I mean, and borrowed some of their stuff as well. I mean, you can clearly see it in that piece right there, a little bit of Kel, a little bit of Min and Bo and stuff like that. I mean, I ain't ashamed to admit it. I'm saying them dudes were nice.
So let me ask you a question. How much of the stuff that we've shown here is legal or was done legally?
I don't think any of it was so far.
Nothing, nothing legal so far.
No,
And schoolyards, handball courts, all this stuff is like public places.
that's right.
So that's good to know, right? A lot of people these days, think that they can't paint anything without permission, but you're doing pieces illegally everywhere.
The times are different though now. You know,
Explain,
I'm
what do you
sure
mean
you
by
can
that?
you can get one in. I mean, but you know, the I guess the penalties now are a little bit different too. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to find out, but I'm pretty sure.
Well, better not to find out. And so here you go, more examples of Quicksilver illegal pieces on the streets. you're playing with style. You mentioned RTW style. We see it with some of those connections and the inspiration in the letters. And you're doing it. You're out there and you're pushing yourself, and the crews that you're painting with are also pushing you. Here's an example of what we're talking about. Here's a ghost-ism duels. And so
Yeah, I think that
where
was
was
one
this?
of my first bucket pieces um,
What do you mean by
with
bucket
cousin Frank.
pieces?
Latex paint. We actually went out there and bought like, or racked, I don't know, a bucket of white roller paint, and we rolled those pieces on the wall. We sketched them with a cheap can of paint or a scrap, and then we rolled the pieces, and then we added colors in there for designs and stuff like that, and then outlined them. And I think that was my first one with with Ghost. My first one ever, but with Ghost.
How important for you was it to um, just paint illegally? Did it ever even cross your mind to paint, legal pieces, or like to get a permission from anybody?
I don't even think it was really a thing at the time. I mean, yeah, I guess, but I mean, I didn't know anybody that was able to plug me into something like that at that time. You know, I think yeah, I don't remember at all having any permission to do any of the pieces I did back then. All those were like track spots, schools, industrial areas like this one right here. Um, you know, just spots where other graffiti existed and we knew that they weren't going to buff. That's where we would like, we would see like, all right, there's not a lot of people coming around. Um, let's freaking drop one right here, you know?
And again, more of your, kind of a experimental lettering.
Yeah, that's silver with silver and black rusto on the tracks. Um, I did like messing around with like a lot of different styles because I remember like seeing Sane and Smith when they were coming around with buckets and they would, Sane was like the master of just doing different styles. Every time he did a piece, it was like, different style. He never ran his outline ever. A lot you know, of his pieces, each one was clearly unique, you know, and drastically different. So I tried to emulate that. I mean, I was like, I want to do, a script piece. I want to do a piece that looks like it's melting, one that's a little futuristic, stuff like that. This was like more or less like inspired by like some United Artists stuff. Man, I was like I'm gonna do this little big TikTok snow piece. I thought I was like the super most freshest dude on the planet when I did this this piece right here. But
And so this is another schoolyard piece.
that is a schoolyard piece, yeah.
Did you ever meet the workers that were cleaning off your walls in the schoolyard?
No, I wouldn't want to stick around for that.
And here's another schoolyard piece.
That's a handle for yeah.
And
That one
so,
was more, huh?
I was just going to say, when you paint these walls and these schoolyards and handball courts, can you imagine the next day the kids coming to school and seeing these? It's quite a surprise.
Oh, I could totally imagine what they're going through. I remember seeing handball courts before they started buffing them, like Lefferts Field. You'd see like tons of dope pieces out there, and Cardozo had like ill pieces. It had like the Rec 127 piece in there with the Kiss and the Sir 167, and somebody dropped this ill TCW piece that had like the crazy connections on it and the sick colors back there. Um, you just saw a lot of crazy pieces, because they didn't buff. It would just be like tags and outlines over tags and outlines, and you know crossing each other out, and misty throw-ups, and then tags over that. And then when someone did a piece over it, they didn't do a full-blown production and roll it out, or actual bubbles in the background to separate the piece from what was there previously. They just did the piece and did like a little trim, force field trim around the thing, and you could see clearly who they went over and everything else behind it and what's originally on the wall. And
So sort of like
you know,
this.
yeah, something like that. Exactly. So you'd show up school, and it would sit there until that piece got dissed, and it would be up there for months. So you would go down there and study the piece, be like, oh damn, look at the letter structure here, look at the blends, look at the designs. Wow, this guy had real paint control. There's no drips on it. You'd be able to get all up close on it because unlike a train, it wouldn't move. You could get really close to the you know, and study this thing. And if it sat there for a couple months, you know, you had time, you know, to really take it all in and you know, learn from that piece on the wall, you know.
Yeah. So question for you. So you mentioned that in 95 you went away to the military.
Right.
What was that like for you? And did you quit? I'm guessing you quit writing, period.
I did. In 1994 is actually when I stopped writing. I stopped writing because I was like on some seriously long probation thing. It was like 3 years that got extended to 5. I was still living with my parents. I was pissing them off. I wasn't taking school serious. I had just lost my job, and I wasn't going anywhere with myself. You know, I was just totally just, you know, wasting time. And then, you know, a lot of the guys I was hanging out with, you know, they were either doing time. There was people that, you know, I was cool with that, you know, OD'd on drugs. And I was like, you know what, I can't sit around here any longer and not do something with myself. So I ran into a recruiter a couple of times, and he basically, you know, got me into the Marines, you know. So I left in 95. And when I went, you know, I seen, you know, I was lucky. I was lucky enough to be stationed close enough to the house, but not close enough. I was stationed in North Carolina, so it was a good 14-hour ride from there to come back home. So I was able to come home at least once a month or every other month. And during that time period when I was coming home, I seen that a lot of the guys I was hanging out with, they weren't doing anything productive. They were still doing the same thing for the next 4 years, and I was like, shit, I'm not hanging out. Coming back to this because I'll just end up doing the same thing I did before I left. So I re-enlisted, and then 9/11 happened, and then I was like, shit, well, you know, New York is my freaking home state, you know. I gotta get some of that. So I stayed around for that, and then before you knew it, I went over 10 years, and I was like, well, shit, man, I might as well just ride it out, and I did, you know.
So you
But
went
yeah,
you went you went all the way. You did 20 plus years.
right.
You know, during those times, I know that you were stationed all over the world. You you did tours during active war. Uh, active wars. You even squeezed in some graffiti here and there in weird places, where you might have been stationed, and then you come back, you know, and then you come back from service. You're retired from service, and you start writing again. What brought you back to painting?
Actually, I was writing while I was in.
Tell us
And that
about
wasn't
that.
something I had planned because I mean, when I actually joined, I had totally, you know, hung it up. I thought I did at least. You know, I didn't write at all. I didn't mess around. Um, yeah, hardly. I didn't do anything. I didn't doodle on paper. I didn't really even call anybody and say, "Hey, what's up? You know, you want to chill or anything like that." I mean, if they weren't Marines, I didn't hang out with them at all, really. I barely saw you guys when I did come home. I think the first time I did kind of mess around was in 99 when once again it was me, you, and Cento. I mean, yeah, me, you, and Cento, I guess, hanging out at his spot. And he was like, hey, why don't you do a throw up on this gate outside? Um, and then I was like, nah, I'm not into that. And then he somehow convinced me to do a throw up on the gate outside of his studio. And then he got me hyped up, and we ended up doing some freights right down the block from it. It was me, him, and a tome. And we got chased, I guess, at the end of the piece. And I remember hiding underneath freaking the freights for like an hour and telling myself like, oh my God, you know, if I can get out of this, I'll never do it again. You know, it was one of those situations. That was probably like the only time I really, um, I think when I actually got back in the graph was like 2015, 2016. I did you know, Ghost came to LA with, and I met up with him and Frame. We went and did some pieces of the LA River. And, you know, they were doing pieces. I did a piece. I ended up going over myself because I didn't like my shit. And then the following year after that, I did a piece with Stain and Spear. And that actually is probably what brought me back because it was a piece that was the, you know, the first Leap piece I think I actually did. It was at this place called Writer's Block in San Diego. They dragged me out there, and I think what happened was Stain had taken a picture and submitted it to this online site called Streets of Saying Things, and I hadn't written it so long, and I didn't even know graffiti was online like that on and this is before smartphones and social media. I think he sent me a link, and I was like, oh shit, you know, let me see what this is. I clicked on the link, and it took me to that page, you know, Saster. I had seen people had left comments on there, and it was like, you know, oh snap, it's good to see this dude back, blah blah blah, and that kind of like hyped me up. I was like, oh snap, I can't believe dudes have remembered who I was, and it's been over 10 years since I wrote. So I was started sneaking out and doing small little knickknacks in like cutty areas around where I was staying at, and that kind of brought me back slowly, you know. Um, and that, yeah, pretty much that's what pretty much brought me back was just, you know, the curiosity of like what people had to say of like what I was doing and stuff like that.
So
But
so fast forward another almost 10 years, here we are, and
right,
you are probably as active as ever, is that right?
probably,
And you're not asking for permission.
yeah, it's a lot more fun when you don't, you know. Um, yeah, I just
Lately I've been seeing, you know, these freight trains, you know, and it seems to be you're a man on a mission with these
right.
freights. They're not small, they're big. What's going on with the freights?
Um, you know, I mean, I just like, you know, I love painting them. They're just, you know, they travel around, they don't get buffed. You know, I mean, I could go try to like bomb the streets, but for what? You know, I mean, you're just gonna let people know exactly where you are or where you live or approximation approximately where you're at, and then on top of that, like, you know, it's gonna get buffed. They're gonna build a case on you, and for what? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, um, it's not very likely those freights will get buffed. They're going to travel around. People bench them. You know, there's obviously no permission when you do them, and they look crazy when you're standing next to them, and they just, you know, it's like addicting, you know, and just to see your name that big rolling by, um, or just in a flick, it's just nuts, you know.
I mean,
Um,
you're really going big. You're not doing panel pieces. You're going and doing the entire freight train many times
well,
over.
I mean, when I first started out, I was doing a lot of freights with my man Rovas, and we were hitting the intermodals. They're like the ones that stack the containers on top, and these trains are like really, they're kind of short, you know. They're just like a little flatbed kind of thing. And you know, I was doing mostly throw ups and straight letters, and then you know, but I was kind of hitting one per car, and I guess he had told me that, hey, somebody went over you because you had too many of them in a row, and they were doing a piece, and they did a piece over one of my thoughts. And then I noticed too, like, in some of the yards I go to, guys will do pieces over older pieces, or if space is limited, hey, you know how it is. Hey, I'm taking that spot, and they will do a piece bigger than that person's piece. So I was like, well, what's the point of doing a piece if your piece might not live because, of limited space? Not to mention, like I said, I think it's easier to read something that's very legible. I see a lot of ill burns on these freights, but if you're driving along the freeway or you're trying to bench and this thing is going 60 miles per hour, it's kind of hard to really read if what it says if it's very busy. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just go super big, keep it simple, very legible, and just do it that way. Plus, I think today's paints, they don't last like Rustos back in the day. I mean, some of these paints, you paint and these freights are sitting out in the elements, rolling around the desert, the mountains, in the rain, in the snow, and it's sitting out there all day, just baking in the sun. They don't look so hot after like 6 months to a year, whereas latex will rock for a long time, so. And it's more cost effective because I'm not sponsored. It's not like, I'm getting cases of Montana sent to my crib. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm doing Rusto, and whatever fancy paints I can afford, I'll do that. So I just prefer to use, latex and just go extra big. And it's like, cheap to buy a bucket of Oops paint. And it's a lot quicker too. You know what I'm saying? For me to do my name that way.
I love it. I love it. It seems like you're still sort of have the same bombing mindset that you had before. You're trying to get noticed. You're trying to be efficient. You're trying to be quick about it, and you're trying to get away with it.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
So, during this time that you returned to the States from active duty, a lot has changed in I guess the world of graffiti, and it's a little bit more accepted in certain cities. The writers that you remember that you wrote with, 30 years ago, no longer write, and there's a whole new generation of people with a different mindset. Um, and you're falling into this sort of new generation of writers. What's the difference between, if there is a difference between the writers today and the writers from back in the days?
I think they're a little bit friendlier for the most part. Um, they they have different approaches to
I lost. Say that again.
a different approach, I guess. How they want to present their name and get up. You know.
Sure, sure. What about the now that you're back, you see in the streets in cities like New York, Miami, Los Angeles, there is something called like street art, or mural art, like all this stuff that didn't really exist in the 80s when you were coming up, in the 90s. It was so small, but now you're competing for space if you're outside. uh, do you, you seem, I know you, and you seem, you've been able to adapt. you know you kind of keep, dual the writer, illegal on the freights, and you've developed another persona or another style to sort of play in the streets. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Are you referring to like my seven line art studio
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah, absolutely.
Um, yeah. So that whole thing is it started off as like I said, when I was in the military, I traveled around, and I've been to a lot of different countries and saw a lot of their cultures and their artwork, um, and gravitated towards the different places that I've been to, their styles and their history. Um, But obviously, you remember this, man. I got into a little something something when I was overseas, and I ended up being investigated. So I couldn't, draw or go out and do anything, that was graffiti related. Like I had to like hide. So to keep myself sane, I started messing around with watercolors and doodling, and I always wanted to go back to the arts because it's something that keeps me calm and you know um, and stuff like that. So I started doing a lot of artwork while I was um, secured to my barracks. You know what I'm saying? Like I wasn't allowed to go out or anything like that. I was doing a lot of drawing. I was drawing a lot of faces, a lot of masks and stuff like that, and from different places. And I started combining the different styles together to represent like unity and world peace. Um, but I was trying to get into galleries, and I was trying to get like, in people's faces with it, and it wasn't easy because it's like who and how long you've been out there, and exposure and stuff like that. So um, instead of waiting around and trying to like go to shows and try to network with people that way, I took it to the street and started painting my artwork on the street, and it got noticed pretty quickly because it was a little bit different than some of the other stuff. Like, it wasn't like wheat paste, um, and it wasn't like, like an actual mural. It was more a combination of like graffiti and like being real super gritty, um, calligraphy and stuff like that. It was a little bit different. So I think it stood out more, and it took off for me somewhat, you know?
So you've been able to paint. I'm guessing you're doing this stuff illegally, legally, sort of like a mix.
There's a little bit of a mix in that one. I mean, most of it I try to keep as illegal as possible, just to keep that whole thing going, But sometimes, you got to take a couple spots when they're offered to you, just because if I want to do something a little bit more elaborate, I can't be rushing it and it'll come out like trash, and you don't want that to ruin your reputation or your the quality of work.
Right. So you're playing in both of these arenas, but now you have two identities.
Right.
You have the 7 line identity, and then you have dual, and you're doing both.
I love it. You know what I'm saying? It gives me options and a variety. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like kind of boring to just write your name the same thing over and over again. If you just don't, I mean, you know, how many throw ups can you possibly do? You know what I'm saying? It's the same. It's fun, but it's not challenging anymore. But when I do my street art, it's a little different. You got a lot of those hearts and the Wu Tang and all that other stuff. Like, it's not something I prepare for when I go. I look at those, I find a spot, I look at it, and I'm like, okay, this will look great on this wall, and whatever colors I happen to have, I crack the outlines on the wall, and when I do the actual brushwork on there, it's just freehand. It's straight out of the head. It's not something I sit there and like sketch out or anything like that. It's just on the spot. It's all impromptu. Just bam, knock it out.
All right. And sometimes they last, and sometimes they don't last, and that's just fine.
Yeah, I don't get upset with that. You know, if the longer it rides, the better. But I mean, as long as some people see it, and people taking notes that you're doing your thing, then it's great. You know.
So what's next for you, man? What are you working on? Where can people see your stuff? Are you planning anything that you might be able to share with us?
I have some pieces hanging in several different places. I have work hanging in a space called UCUX out of Fairfax, Los Angeles. They have an artsy page, and you can see my work there. Island Art Gallery out of Harlem. They have some of my works hanging there, and they also have an artsy page as well. The Museum of Graffiti has some of my pieces and also has an artsy as well. I am going to be sending some more pieces down to Deep Space Art Gallery in Jersey City. And this Thursday, actually, I'm going to be doing an opening with Sector 7 Contemporary Art Gallery, also known as S7CAG, located in South Pasadena, on the 18th of November between 6 and 9 p.m. I'll do a post on it on my page, my Seven Line Art Studio page. But I have several pieces going up there as well.
So you know, as much as we've celebrated the work that you're doing in the streets and showing, you know, your illegal graffiti and your illegal street art, you're also doing work in the studio and doing shows and sort of bridging this, you know, the street and gallery world.
Yeah, I'm trying. You know, I'm trying to get in there, you know, as best as possible. You know, whenever the opportunity comes around, I try to take it. You know.
Sure. And so, you know, for all of those that are here with us tonight, you know, this thing to Duel. I'm Alan Kett, and we're learning about his sort of career and his trajectory, and we're also learning that you know an artist like Duel, as much as he paints in the streets, sometimes these artists do have studio practices, and you could actually buy some of his art if you're into this stuff, which is I think is a bonus, because back in the days you wouldn't get that opportunity. You see it in the streets, that's it lives there. You can never buy this work. It's just work that is painted out in the streets for you to appreciate. But now there seems to be more and more opportunities that are opening up for writers, even though there might be only a few or small opportunities. It's starting to happen, and it's starting to change, and there's starting to be an acceptance with writers like Duel that's like a very hardcore in the sense that he paints in the streets and has had that practice for a long time, but now is willing to allow people to buy his work and to share that side of him in that way. And so Duel, you know, big ups to you for sort of doing what you want to do and going in the direction that you want to go, and sort of you know, following your own intuition and following your own way of doing things, when I know that a lot of your friends might be knuckleheads and not agree with your path or what you're doing or who you're doing it with, but you're sort of following your own course, which is not always easy. So I want to, you know, big you up for that and for being true to yourself, you know, and and much continued success on this new sort of journey that you're on.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
So, no doubt. And so, listen, we've come to the hour mark. It's been an hour talking to you. This is about the longest that I've ever talked to you in my life. And I appreciate it. For everybody that's joined us today, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for supporting us with badges today. We appreciate that. Duel, we appreciate everything that you're doing in the streets, in the gallery, whether it's with your, you know, brush or your throw ups or your pieces. You know, we appreciate you very much. We hope to see you back down here in Miami, doing throw ups, doing pieces, doing your roller joints. We want it all, and we'll see you very soon in person.
Yeah.
All right.
Hopefully soon. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. I appreciate it very much. And everybody, I appreciate you guys being with us today. A new art talk will be up on Thursday. Brimstone will be back, and come and visit us. We've got a lot of great things going on in Miami in the month of December. December 1st is our 2-year anniversary event. We'll be presenting Fuzi, UV, TPK crew from Paris right here in Miami. And we hope to see you guys down here soon. Peace. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.